Hello and welcome to Fantasy Football by Ben. Today I'll be talking about my wide receivers and tight end rankings. If you haven't seen my video yesterday, which was my quarterback and running back rankings, you should go check that out. Alright, so for number one, for wide receivers, for week 13, I have Davante Adams, who's going up against the Eagles. Eagles' defense hasn't been great, and they play a lot of man coverage, and they're pretty solid. Okay, they're a pretty solid defense all around, but their corners haven't been great. And Darius Slay last week got burnt by DK Metcalf, and I think Davante Adams can do better than that. And last year when they played, Davante had 10 catches for 180 yards, and that was without Darius Slay, obviously, but also he didn't play the whole fourth quarter. So really, I think Davante Adams is the number one wide receiver this week in fantasy. At number two, I have Tyreek Hill versus the Broncos. Tyreek Hill is coming off of a 58-point game. And, there's reasons why Tyreek Hill on most people's lists are probably number one, but on mine, I have him at number two this week. I think the Broncos have a pretty good defense, and obviously, if they get really far ahead in that game, I don't think they're going to throw the ball a whole lot. So maybe if Tyreek Hill gets his 200 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half again, then I do think that it could be a really big week for Tyreek Hill. But outside of that, I don't think that Tyreek Hill is going to have as big of a week as he had last week. So I expect him to be closer to like 25, 30 points this week. And I think Davante could go over that. So I have Davante at 1 and Tyreek Hill at 2. At number 3 this week, which might also surprise some people, I have Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is going up against the Patriots. Patriots have a pretty tough defense, and he'll probably be covered by Stefon Gilmore. But I do think that how well Keenan Allen's been playing and how much Justin Herbert targets him, I think that Keenan Allen every week could have a big week. And he's been getting 10-plus targets every week. So I do think Keenan Allen is the number 3 wide receiver this week in fantasy. At number 4, I have DK Metcalf versus the Giants. Like I said when I was talking about Russell Wilson in my last video, I don't think there's a weakness for DK Metcalf, and Bradbury's been a really good corner this year, but I thought Darius Slay was a really good corner, and DK Metcalf made him look really bad, so I do think that DK Metcalf will be a wide receiver 4 this week in fantasy. At number 5, I have A.J. Brown versus the Browns, which is kind of funny. So my bold prediction was that Ryan Tannehill would be a top 5 scoring quarterback, and for that to happen, A.J. Brown has to have a pretty big day. And so I do think that A.J. Brown will have a really big day this week. And so, last week he had a pretty good week, but I think he'll do better this week even than he had last week. At number 6 this week, I have DeAndre Hopkins versus the Rams. So if you watch any of our videos on Friday, which we didn't post one last week, but hopefully this week we will. If you watch any of our videos, Eric always talks about Jalen Ramsey and being a lockdown corner, and so his always guys is whoever Ramsey's covering, that's going to be the guy that's going to have a bad week this week. And this week it's going to be DeAndre Hopkins. So I do think DeAndre Hopkins is going to have a tough matchup, but I think he can do it. He's one of the best receivers in the league, and I do think that DeAndre Hopkins is at that elite tier where pretty much any corner that's covering him is still, a good play for DeAndre Hopkins in fantasy. I have my number 6 this week. At number 7, I have Stefon Diggs at 49ers. 49ers haven't been great this year defensively. They did get Richard Sherman back, but I don't know how that's really going to help them with Stefon Diggs because Diggs is a pretty good go-deep guy, and I don't know if Sherman's like that anymore, where he could cover that. He might out-physical him, but I think they could just play Stefon Diggs on the other side, and they'd be fine. I think Diggs is a really good play this week. At number 8, I have Justin Jefferson versus the Jaguars. Jaguars are not very good. They're actually like bottom 5 in the league against pass catchers. And so I do think that Justin Jefferson will have a big week this week, and he's coming off a really big week last week. So I do think that Justin Jefferson could have another big week this week. At number 9, I have Adam Thielen versus the Jaguars. So I hope he's coming back off COVID. I don't know if that's a for sure thing yet, but if he plays this week, I think he's a really great play. I have Adam Thielen at 9. Same reason as Justin Jefferson. I think that they both could score touchdowns this week. And the Jaguars' offense isn't bad, so I do think this could be a higher scoring game because Vikings' defense isn't that great either. At number 10, I have Terry McLaurin at Steelers. So Terry McLaurin's kind of interesting because the last 5 weeks he's had 7-plus targets, or every game this year he's had 7-plus targets. Also, the last 5 weeks he's had 7 catches or over 80 yards. So I do think that Terry McLaurin is a great play every week. So I have my number 10 this week. He's a top 10 wide receiver. Terry McLaurin is a good play this week. At number 11, I have Calvin Ridley versus the Saints. Saints are a pretty tough defense, but Calvin Ridley, last time they played him, he looked pretty good. So I do think Calvin Ridley is pretty solid. And if Julio's out again, we don't know. I think that Calvin Ridley even gets up further on my list. And so right now I have Calvin Ridley at 11, but I think that he's a pretty solid player no matter if Julio plays or not. At number 12, I have Allen Robinson versus the Lions. Lions are horrible against the pass. My only downfall with Allen Robinson is Mitch Trubisky's his quarterback, and so I think that hurts him a little bit because even though Mitch Trubisky likes to throw deep, Allen Robinson's not always the guy that likes to go deep, or that is the guy that goes deep, and so I do think that's going to hurt his value this week in fantasy, even though it's an easier defense that they're going up against. At number 13, I have Julio Jones versus the Saints. Like I said with Calvin Ridley, I do think that the Saints have a pretty good defense, but Julio Jones is somebody you just don't sit if he plays. And so I think Julio Jones, if he plays this week, is a really solid play. And so I have him at number 13. At number 14, I have Michael Thomas versus the Falcons. And, I mean, Michael Thomas, the last time they played the Falcons, he had 9 for 103. But, I mean, that offense is really run heavy. I do think, though, that with the game that they played last week, it was definitely like going against the Broncos without a quarterback. It was definitely more of like a run style game, and they kind of made it seem like that. And so I do think that this week going up against a defense or against an offense that's pretty good, and then also a defense that's not very good against wide receivers, I do think that Michael Thomas could move up this week, but right now I'm at number 14. At number 15, I have Cooper Kupp at Cardinals. Cardinals have not been very good against the pass this year, and Cooper Kupp is playing on a slot, and that's where they get with the most fantasy points. So I do think that Cooper Kupp is a really solid play this week against the Cardinals. I have my number 15. If you want to know more information, I have my bold prediction video 2 videos ago. I mean, you can just watch it and look at the Cooper Kupp section and see why I had him as my bold prediction this week. At number 16, I have Tyler Lockett versus the Giants. And, I mean, Tyler Lockett last week didn't really do too much, and it kind of hurt a lot of people's fantasy lineups, but I mean, Tyler Lockett's still just a must-start guy. I mean, the Giants' second corner is not very good, and their slot corner is really bad. And so I think this could be a really good bounce-back week for Tyler Lockett, but I'm not going to rank him ahead of DK Metcalf or his. I guess most people are ahead of him. And so I have right now Tyler Lockett at 16. Obviously, he could move up, but I want to see another good week out of Tyler Lockett before I rank him inside my top 12 again. At number 17, I have Robert Woods at Cardinals. Like I was saying with Cooper Kupp, Cardinals have not been very good against pass catchers this year. And so I do think that Robert Woods could have a really big week this week. And so I have him at number 17. At number 18, I have DeVante Parker versus the Bengals. If it's Ryan Fitzpatrick playing, I think that DeVante Parker is a really, really high ceiling. If it's Tua playing, I think that DeVante Parker's ceiling is definitely a little bit lower, but I don't know if it's significantly lower. I think he's still a must-start wide receiver, and I think DeVante Parker's been pretty solid this year. At number 19 this week, I have Diontae Johnson versus Washington. I think that Washington has really good corners, but like Eric and I talked about, they have a really good balance of corners, but not a very good top-heavy corner, and Diontae Johnson's been receiving 13 targets, 12 targets, 11 targets, 16 targets, 15 targets. So I do think that Diontae Johnson, if he gets the targets and he's fully healthy, will get big play opportunities and he gets a lot of volume. So I do think that Diontae Johnson is the best receiver out of the Steelers receivers you can pick from. At number 20, I have Brandin Cooks versus the Colts. So this is really tough because Colts have a really good defense, but Brandin Cooks is probably the wide receiver 1 in that offense now. And so I have to rank Brandin Cooks because even though he's going up against a really tough defense, I do think that Brandin Cooks is a really solid receiver, and he's been very consistent for you if you have him on your fantasy team. And so I do think Brandin Cooks could have a really good week this week, but it's going to be tough against the Colts. At number 21, I have Chase Claypool versus Washington. So Chase Claypool is pretty much matchup proof as well, just like Diontae Johnson, and probably JuJu, I would say as well. But I mean, Chase Claypool's been very consistent for them. Last week he averaged the most yards per catch, and all of them were really bad yards per catch. It was like Diontae Johnson like 7, JuJu like 5.5, and then Claypool like 9 or something like that. But I mean, Claypool also had like 10 targets last week, so it was a very good week, and I think Chase Claypool is the second best receiver out of that receiving core. I have been number 21 this week, going up against Washington, who is pretty tough against corners or against wide receivers. So I do think this could be a tough matchup for Chase Claypool, but I trust him. At number 22, I have Deebo versus the Bills. Deebo is coming off of a game where he caught a lot of passes for a lot of yards. So I do think Deebo is a very good receiver if you're going to play him. I think he's definitely a wide receiver 2, maybe wide receiver 1 borderline. And so I think he's been pretty solid. And if you have Deebo, I think it's a really good play this week against the Bills because he's basically their only offensive threat. But Ayuk should be back this week. Also, Mostert's playing, and I shouldn't have said only offensive threat, but he's probably their best outside threat this week. Number 23, Amari Cooper versus the Ravens. Ravens have really tough corners, and Jimmy Smith just got hurt, but, I mean, Peters is pretty tough, and so is Humphrey, and so I do think that this is going to be a pretty tough game for Amari Cooper, but he's coming off of one of his best games this season, and so as long as him and Andy Dalton click, I think Amari Cooper could have a really big week this week. At number 24, I have DJ Chark at Vikings. Vikings don't have a very good secondary this year. It's been better in the past, but DJ Chark with Mike Glennon, I think they can form a duo, and I do think that this could be a really big week for DJ Chark. I'm at number 24 this week. At number 25, I have JuJu Smith-Schuster versus Washington. Washington has a really good slot corner, and so Juju's going to have a pretty tough matchup, but I do think that this could be a game where they're going to throw a lot, and so I have JuJu at 25 because I think that they're all going to get volume between the three of them. At number 26, I have Michael Pittman Jr. at Texans. Texans are horrible against wide receivers, and I think Michael Pittman Jr. is the best receiver out of the Indianapolis Colts receivers, and so I think this could be a really big week for Michael Pittman. I have him at number 26. At number 27, I have Jarvis Landry at Titans. So this game is going to be a shootout, I think, and so whether the Browns are going to run the ball or they're going to throw the ball, Jarvis Landry's coming off a really big game, so I do think that he might get a lot of volume again, and so I have Jarvis Landry at 27. I think that he's pretty solid, and if this game turns out to be a shootout, I think Jarvis Landry is a very big part of that. At number 28, I have T. Higgins at Dolphins. So last week I was deciding whether I'm going to put T. Higgins in, or this week I was deciding whether I'm going to put T. Higgins in or not, or if I'm going to have any Bengal receiver in. And I decided to go with T. Higgins. I think he's the best receiver out of them. Not best receiver, but I think he has the best chance to get into the end zone and the best chance to be the highest fantasy scorer out of them. So I have T. Higgins at number 28 this week. At number 29 this week, I have Jakobi Meyers at Chargers. Jakobi Meyers has been pretty consistent. I mean, realistically, the last couple of weeks he's had a downfall. I do think, though, that the rise of Bird kind of hurt him. But I do think that Jakobi Meyers will have a really good week this week. And they're going up against the Chargers, and I think this game's going to have to be a shootout in the end because the Chargers put up a lot of points in general. And I think this game's going to be a really high-scoring game. Well, not really high-scoring. I think it's going to be probably 30s. It'll be 30 to 27. That would be my guess. And I think that the Jakobi Meyers is going to have to get some passes get some receiving work out of Cam Newton. And so I think that Jakobi Meyers could have a big week this week. At number 30, I have Corey Davis versus the Browns. So my bold prediction was Tannehill being a top 5 scoring quarterback. And so to make that come true, I think that Corey Davis is going to have a big week. And going up against the Browns, who don't have a great secondary, I think that Corey Davis could be a really good play this week. I have my number 30 this week. All right, so now we're going to get into the tight ends. So for my tight end 1 for week 13, I have Travis Kelce versus the Broncos. Travis Kelce's been phenomenal. I mean, every week that you're playing him, pretty much you're guaranteed almost 10 to 28 points. And so maybe even 30. 10 to 30. I'll go with that. 10 to 30 points. Travis Kelce is very consistent, and I think that he's going to be the top tight end to finish this year. So I have Travis Kelce tight end 1 every week from now on. Right now, Travis Kelce is number 1 tight end for week 13. My number 2 tight end this week is Darren Waller at the Jets. Darren Waller last week had a pretty good game. It wasn't great or anything, but this week I think he's going to have a really good week. And so Darren Waller, I think, is the best player that I would play out of the Raiders receivers. And so I have Darren Waller this week at number 2 tight end. I think he's going to have a really good week, really good bounce back week this week in fantasy. At number 3, I have TJ Hockenson at Giants. Giants are not very good against tight ends, and TJ Hawkinson's coming off a really good game. And so I think that, especially if Kenny Galladay's out, which I haven't really heard anything about that. And so I think that if Kenny Galladay's out again, I think that TJ Hockenson finishes as a top 3 tight end this week. I have my number 3 this week. At number 4, I have Robert Tonyan versus the Eagles. Eagles are horrible against tight ends, and I think that with how the Packers use him in that offense, I think he's a great tight end play this week. I have him at number 4. At number 5, I have Evan Engram at Seahawks. So Evan Engram, the last 4 games, has seen 9 targets. No, 4 of the last 5 games, he's seen 9 targets. And so Evan Ingram's been getting volume. So I do think that Evan Engram going forward is a really good tight end play. The only thing that's really going to hurt him is that Daniel Jones might not be playing this game. And so I do think that would hurt Evan Engram quite a bit. But I still think he's definitely a top 5 tight end play. And if Daniel Jones somehow does play, I do think that Evan Engram is for sure guaranteed a top 5 tight end play this week. At number 6, I have Dallas Goedert at Packers. So Dallas Goedert's been really consistent the last couple weeks that he's been back. And so I do think that Dallas Goedert is a solid tight end going forward. And the Packers are a pretty tough pass defense against tight ends. And so I do think that Dallas Goedert might struggle, but at the same time, he's basically their only outside option right now. And he's Carson Wentz's favorite target. So I do think that Dallas Goedert will have a good week this week, even against a tough Packer defense. At number 7, I have Hunter Henry versus the Patriots. Hunter Henry's been pretty solid the last couple weeks, and I do think that Hunter Henry could have a really big week against the Patriots, but they're known to be pretty good against tight ends, and so it could be a tough game for Hunter Henry, but right now I have him at number 7. I think he could have a big day. At number 8, I have Hayden Hurst versus the Saints. Saints have not been very good against tight ends, but they've been getting better every week. And so I do think that this could hurt Hayden Hurst, but he did look pretty good last week, so I think that Hayden Hurst could have a big week this week. And I have him at number 8. At number 9, I have Eric Ebron versus Washington. Washington's not very good against tight ends, and so I do think this could be a really big week for Eric Ebron. He had a lot of targets last week. He had the same amount as Diontae Johnson. They both had 13. And so I do think that Eric Ebron could have a really big week. And if he scores a touchdown, he's definitely like a top 5 tight end this week in fantasy. For number 10 tight end this week, I have Jordan Reed. He's going up against the Bills, who are the second worst defense against the tight ends. And so I do think this is going to be a really big week for Jordan Reed. I have him at number 10. If you haven't watched my bold prediction video, go check it out. I had Jordan Reed on it, so just a little spoiler. But I do think that he's going to have a big week, and I do think that Nick Mullins really likes targeting his tight end, so I think that could be a really good thing for Jordan Reed this week. At number 11, I have Noah Fant at Chiefs. Chiefs have not been very good against tight ends this year either, and he should be getting his quarterback back, so that's really going to help him. And I think that Noah Fant is a pretty solid play. But if Drew Lock doesn't play, then I do think that Noah Fant definitely kind of just disappears off this list. At number 12, I have Jonnu Smith versus the Browns. See, the Browns are not very good against tight ends either. And Jonnu Smith, I think he put up 0 points last week, so it's pretty tough to think something. So I think that Jonnu Smith will have a better week than what he had last week. But that's not really saying much because he had 0 points last week because he had 0 catches. But without even a single target. And so I do think that this week is going to be a really good week for Jonnu Smith, going up against a defense that's pretty solid up front, but they can't cover tight ends. So I do think that that could really help Jonnu Smith. And also my bold prediction was that Ryan Tannehill would be top 5 QB. So I do think that Jonnu Smith doing well would really help that. At number 13, I have Mike Gesicki versus the Bengals. Bengals are horrible against tight ends. They've given up a lot of touchdowns this year to tight ends. And Mike Gesicki's coming off a pretty solid game. So I do think that Mike Gesicki could have a pretty good week this week against the Bengals, and I have him at number 13. At number 14, I have Austin Hooper at Titans. So I was just talking about how the Browns are really bad against tight ends. Titans are also really bad against tight ends, and so I think Austin Hooper could have a really big week as well. And he's kind of Baker Mayfield's like go-to guy in the red zone, and so I think that could be a really good thing for Austin Hooper, and so I think he's definitely a top 15 tight end this week. At number 15, I have Kyle Rudolph versus the Jaguars. Jaguars are also not good against tight ends, and this is with Irv Smith being out. If he's in, then I would say Kyle Rudolph's not in my top 15, but as of right now, I have not heard anything about Irv Smith, and so I'm just going to assume that he's out, and this could be a really big week for Kyle Rudolph. I have him at number 15 this week. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to turn on the notifications and ring the bell. And then so you can get all the post notifications whenever I'm posting something like today. And so, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next video. Peace. I don't know if Eric's going to be on tomorrow. I'll talk to him and see what's going on. But if not, stay tuned. I might be posting a video on Saturday. Never know. See you in the next video.